going to start out with a brief historical overview. And Laura Bothke has been heading up an archives ministry that put together this wonderful show. I hope you'll stay after the service today and look at this show if you haven't already. So Laura, do you want to kick us off with the history of 125 years in under 10 minutes?
This is the challenge. 125 years. This community has been worshiping together for 125 years. They started out in people's homes and just gathering wherever they could find a place. It started out monthly, actually, and then it grew to the point that they went to being weekly. They then incorporated in 1889 and became St. Matthew's Parish in the Diocese of Minnesota. They built their first building, which seated 100 people. Only 100 people, and you can see a picture of that right there. In 1914, it was evident that it was too small. They also had some issues with it that were going to require some major repairs, so they decided it was time to build. They had a wonderful priest at that time who had gone into the priesthood as a second career after being a contractor and builder. So, they had a real in there. They also got a wonderful architect, Clarence H. Johnson. He did lots of buildings around the St. Paul, Minneapolis, Minnesota area. How many of you know of St. John the Evangelist? St. Clement's Memorial Mission with Memorial Parish, their parish house he designed. He was the architect for it. He was the architect for Christ Church after St. Matthew's in 1932 when they rebuilt at 6th and Pleasant, which is no longer there because it's the entrance to 35E. And he also did some work down in Faribault, Shattuck St. Mary's, the former Shattuck. He did the building. He was the designer for the Cathedral Church of Our Merciful Savior in Faribault also. So these are just a few of, and I just kind of picked out some of his Episcopal ones to put up here. I did put up the Louis Hill House because that is such an important piece of our history here in Minnesota. We also had very strong roots with Breck School. The reason we had roots with Breck School was they moved it to the St. Anthony Park area to be a feeder to the agricultural part of the University of Minnesota. And in doing that, they needed a superintendent, and it just happened to be our rector did two jobs. Would do the superintendent or later on the chaplaincy at Breck School, as well as taking care of the parish needs and what the parish was doing. Then we got on to Breck School. Finally, we needed a full-time priest, so we severed our relationship as the chaplain of Breck School. We've had several wonderful rectors, and you can look up here to see about all of them and the years they were here, and we just continued going on from there. The choir started in about 1914, and it wasn't until 1918 that girls were accepted in the choir. So it was a men's and boys choir for a number of years. Once they had girls in it, the girls now, how many of you have a history of Anglican heritage, that you grew up with grandmothers and grandfathers knowing something about the Episcopal Church, or you grew up in the Episcopal Church? I see quite a few hands. Well, back even when I was little, in the 1950s, we had to have our heads covered. And we had to have our heads covered to the point you didn't enter the back of the church without putting a covering on. They had extra little, we called them doilies, in the back of the church that we could put to cover our head. When we came on Saturday to do Junior Altar Guild, we had little lace doilies that we wore. There is an example of a communion one over in the display box over there. And these were held on with bobby pins. And some of you young kids may not know what bobby pins are, so we got some bobby pins over there for you to see what they are. So, and I am concentrating on the earlier part of the history because the stories will tell more of our current history than what I have got. So then we get into the early 50s when we started doing the dining hall at the state fair. We only did that for about 9 years, but this was a very important piece of St. Matthew's history. What it did was not only bring in some revenue, which allowed us to expand, a more important piece of it was it brought us together as a community. It brought the people together. Now, did any of you ever eat at St. Matt's dining hall? I'm the only one. My first experiences of the state fair were to go to the horse show. And we would go when my dad was traveling, and my mom would take me and my 2 little brothers, and we'd go to the state fair, and we would have dinner at St. Matthew's Dining Hall, and then we would go over to see the horse show. So my roots, although I've only actually been worshiping here for about a year, go back to when I was about 6 or 7. There are lots of people that can tell you stories about the dining hall. I believe Maryland's, am I correct that you and your husband headed that up one year?
What's that?
The dining hall?
No.
No, it wasn't you.
Peg House.
Peg Hog's family who headed up. So we still have some good history going here forward, and realize this history is very important. And you can see all the pictures that we've gathered so far of people and events that have happened here. This is very much an integral part of all of our lives. So I encourage you all to look at this. If you have pieces to add, things of interest that you think other people should know about that happened here, by all means, write it down. If you're not a writer, talk to somebody who is a writer and have them write it down for you. We need to try and capture all the more history we can. We have fairly good documented history up to the centennial in 1989, but then it's kind of, who knows what happened. So in written documentation, it's all in people's heads. So please, get back to us with your information so that we can add to it. If you have pictures you think we should have up here, by all means, bring them in. We've got 3, this is up until the 1st of November. We would love to add more pictures. Thank you.
Great. Laura, thank you. Wow, I am impressed at what you covered in under 10 minutes. I need some help getting this. It's actually light. It's awkward, but light the screen back here, because we have some pictures from our history. Our present, we're going to pull up here. Great. So thank you so much. Watch out for that cord. And again, thank you to Laura and the archives team for this fantastic show and for cleaning up our archives. Our former archivists are smiling at you from heaven because the archives have really gotten quite messy. So I think Dwight, my helpful assistant, will, we want to bring this down a little bit. Let's do this. So I would, thank you. I'd like to ask Dan White. Dan White was witness to a resurrection, not Jesus's resurrection, but to a resurrection that actually happened here at St. Matt. So Dan, would you come forward? Dan was a leader here way back when and saw some pretty amazing things. Thank you.
Thank you, Blair. I think it's comparatively easy to be a leader when you're one of 5 or 6 people. So the selection criteria are not rigorous. Can I ask, Dick? Hi, good morning. How are you? Who besides Dick Hotchkiss either was here in 1970 or had family that was here in 1970? Hi, Ruth. Good morning. Anybody else? Ooh, who's back there?
Martha Hotchkiss, I'm Dick's daughter.
Yeah, hi, Martha.
Abbases.
I'm sorry?
The Abbases, Joan and Wally.
Oh, hi.
Please hold the mic up to your
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Will do. I attended St. Matthew's from 1963 to 1987. And when I joined, I was, of course, a kid. And St. Matthew's was a pretty thriving parish in the form of most 60s Episcopal churches that was still in the transition from the Republican Party in prayer to what we are today. And but as a result, it was on the glide path down. And there were 4 years when I didn't come to church. Those were the years I was in college. And I came back in 1975. And in 1975, the priest who had served here for quite a long time, Doug Pitts, was just on his way out. He had just left. And we had brought in a new, the diocese had assigned us an interim rector named David Perachini. Now, David Perachini was one of these very interesting East Coast types who came in with a great aura of the ability to get things done, and someone who was well connected in high places. He served on the board of Minnesota Public Radio. He, after he left St. Matthew's, he was given the job of raising a couple $1 million for the diocese. And the thing I will not forget about David Perachini's time here was that it happened at the time that the 28 book was being transitioned out of and into our current prayer book. And for geezers like me who remember those days, of course, it was very difficult and stressful to give up the book that we had grown up with. And I'll never forget David one time leading a breakfast after the 8 o'clock service right over there and saying, well, now let's take a look at this 79 book. And he got so much difficulty, flack, harassment, that he only did that once. And so this place had the struggles that I think a great deal of the church had. But when I came back in 1975, there were 15 people who were showing up on a Sunday here. And that was pretty consistent. Sometimes we dip down to 12, sometimes we get up to 18, but 15 was the number. And to me, the remarkable story about St. Matthew's is we genuinely had a resurrection experience. And it happened, I think, because God wanted it to happen. But the instruments that he chose were Dave Perachini, who came in and was a very fresh breath of fresh air. And after he'd been here a year or two, we called Grant. And I still remember the excitement and the joy of having Grant and Elaine come, and how this really infused the place with a real sense of, you know what, we are going to make it. And so my only message this morning is, I know life in the parish is sometimes wonderful and sometimes challenging, but this place has really had a resurrection. It's part of our history. And I would urge you to think of that as you go forward. Thank you.
And thank you so much. Thank you. So important to remember what has happened, what God has done in our history. Kieran Fifely, who is actively making sandwiches in the kitchen, will be, oh, there she is, will be talking about two big themes here, two big gifts of this faith community, food and hospitality.
Speak right in so that camera. Okay, please let me know if I'm a little loud. Well, food and hospitality is something I experienced the very first day I came to St. Matthew's, and I was welcomed by Gloria Thayer and Bertie Carter. And basically, I've been in the kitchen ever since. It's really hard when you have a great partner like Rosa to turn her down for any kind of help. So food and St. Matthew's have gone together long before we had an official St. Brother Lawrence Guild, There probably was a lovely baptismal reception when Donna Best Bulger was baptized in 1929. So the St. Matthew's Dining Hall at the State Fair brought the volunteers together, and they created many memories as well as money to build the first edition of the choir room and several classrooms. But in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s, there was always something cooking in the kitchen at St. Matthew's. International dinners cooked by foreign visitors or graduate students, something that was dear to Grant's heart, to get people involved. Dinner in the park, after the Music in the Park series concerts, and Rose Hannah's salad luncheons for the St. Anthony Park neighborhood. So for several years in the mid-1990s, we also participated in the St. Anthony Park Art Festival by having a bake sale, and one year it was on Norma's front lawn. So Ray Dittman hauled his smoker down to the center of action down on Como to sell his famous barbecue. But we did give up after several consecutive years of bad weather, rain and wind. There went the tent more than once. And of course, this 8 a.m. service started serving breakfast in the 1970s as Bill and Dorothy Hathaway wanted to attract more students to attend on Sundays. And also, when we had a conveniently broken sidewalk in the front, a pig was roasted over an open fire, a pit had been dug out of the broken sidewalk, and they had a big fundraising to start the seed money for the lift. And the pig was turned continuously from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. all day, and so Minnie had a turn. And we have pictures of Elizabeth and Margaret and Nerland turning the pig. And so we think that this event really cemented in St. Anthony Park. Sorry. That wasn't even on my script here. It cemented our relationship with food and the community. And they walked by, they smelled that roasted pig, and Dennis Daly did pay for the sidewalk to be reconstructed afterwards. But the beginning of Brother Lawrence Guild, the idea came from Nancy Lowry, who's the mother of Katie Lowry and the grandmother to Christopher, Molly, and Noah. And she, at her church, had a hospitality group called Brother Lawrence Guild. And we really didn't know anything about Brother Lawrence then, but we studied a little bit, found out he was a lay brother in the Carmelite monastery in Paris, and he had written this very simple little book, eventually, about expressing his love of God doing everyday tasks like scrubbing pots and pans or baking bread. He said, "We can do little things for God. I turn the cake that is frying in the pan for love of Him." He felt that he was constantly rejoicing in God's presence, no matter how small or mundane the task. And from his book, "Even in the noise and clatter of my kitchen, while several persons are at the same time calling for different things, I possess God in as great tranquility as if I were upon my knees before the Blessed Sacrament." No official portrait exists, but Ruth Donhow has created a painting for us, and our version of Brother Lawrence is always with us, right below the clock, right by the coffee instructions. So for the past 15 years, Brother Lawrence Guild has served many different meals: Commitment Sunday, All Saints Day potluck, Community Thanksgiving dinner, the Maundy Thursday Agape dinner, the African dinner as fundraiser for the Blue House, right after September 11th, with Abby Marier and some other people. We did an Afghan dinner to kind of bring together the Afghan community to support them. And we've catered other events as requested. And we rent the place out, and the owners of Abu Nader Cafe were so thankful for the use of our parish hall for their son's groom's party that they provided fresh communion bread for many years. So the neighbors in St. Anthony Park connect St. Matthew's and good food so thoroughly, the neighbor in distress came over on Thanksgiving morning one year to inquire if we could provide Thanksgiving dinner for her family. And we were able to serve them a full Thanksgiving dinner to go. They didn't have to take it far. So we continue to serve food with love and provide a place for fellowship and sharing. And we can sit down and enjoy a meal if we have time to connect, be together, get to know one another, and share in the presence of God. And we are an international community. We truly do share each other's food and learn about each other that way. Our kids learn to appreciate hummus and sushi when they are toddlers. Everyone is excited when Larai brings akara, which is a black-eyed pea fritter from Nigeria. And one of the most significant moments in our church, I don't know if I can get through this, was when Beatrice gave her prayer for Dan Brown after his drowning accident. And this was a moment when the heavens were opened, God was in our presence, and Beatrice showed us the power of love and faith right here in this parish hall. And it was a going away for Pat Olin on her way to Senegal, but I think it really cemented in our hearts one of the saints of St. Matthew's, and we'll always remember her in that moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Karen, thank you. And thank you for your incredible generosity to our faith community. Welcome, Bishop Pryor. Please come and do a very un-Episcopal thing, and if you'd like to sit in the front row. Welcome.
I only came to make sure David White didn't have too much heresy in it.
He did a great job.
He did do a nice job.
Thank you for joining us. Now I would like to ask Ruth Donhow to come forward to talk about the art ministry and the parish Undercroft Gallery. Ruth? Please watch for this cord. Please, and then it'll be picked up.
Yeah, this is the history of St. Matthew's art ministry, which is bringing us closer to the present in our discussions, reports. The St. Matthew's Art Committee has been presenting shows for about 14 years. It began when we remodeled our building with a new addition in 1996 and was formed out of the planning committee. It became apparent that we would have a wonderful new space for showing art. And so we began with some in-house shows featuring artists in our congregation, and then gradually branched out to include artists from the surrounding community. Every year we put on 5 or 6 shows featuring a diversity of cultures and mediums. In past years, we have included Chinese, African, Iraqi, Native American, and Mexican artists. Next spring, we will also have 2 artists connected with YouthLink, a program for homeless youth supported by our church. These shows have all been self-supporting, and our budget includes a combination of entrance fees, a percentage of sales, and contributions. We also enhanced our worship space with an artist-created Stations of the Cross permanently installed in the nave. It was Blair's idea and was a very successful project. During Holy Week, we have a special service featuring choir music that accompanies each station. Another idea of Blair's was to collaborate with some Jewish artists on the Psalms, which included a lively conversation on our paintings between the Jewish and Christian artists. We feel these shows are an important outreach ministry to the larger community, and that our identity as an arts-friendly church has increased. In 2015, we will be having our 16th annual Community Art Show. We also welcome new members to our committee. Present members include Susan Hardman, the chairperson, Peg Hauk, Richard Stiefel, Janet Murphy, myself, Arnold Carlson, Laura Bathke, and Pat Haga. Vicki Woodcock is the vestry representative in Liaison. Past members have included Marge and Alex Alexander, Donna Berry, Phil Hewitt, Amy Tillotson, Chris Sabilla, and Pat Owen. And I may have forgotten 1 or 2 or more people that have been involved. So I hope that if you think of somebody else that was on that early committee, my memory isn't that good these days. So thank you very much.
And Ruth, can you go back 1 second? Ruth, I believe this is this your painting or is this Joan Hirschfield's? Is this yours? So,
It sort of looks like it could be, but
I was not sure. This is Marge Alexander teaching our children how to make paper bowls. She's a paper maker, an artist in our congregation and the choir, of course. And now I'm going to ask Susan Jones to come forward. She is in the choir. She is reading a story written by Lynn Jenkins, please. And we actually have Lynn Jenkins' baptism picture here as Susan reads. I thought that would be fitting. Thank you.
Thank you. That's perfect. I'm honored to be here because I'm a relatively short-term member of St. Matthew's. And so it's been very fun for me to watch this timeline behind me grow and to see all of these wonderful pictures of our past. I particularly love the one about the member of the vestry voting on prohibition with a bottle in his back pocket. I mean, this is just perfect. It's so evocative of the character and the characters in this church. I thought I would come dressed for the part today. However, I am grateful that I don't have to wear the constricting collar and the little hat that women in the choir used to have to wear. And as you've already heard from Laura, there were no women in the choir at the very beginning. So it's a bit of an honor just to even be here. Lynn Jenkins was unable to be with us today because she is out of town. So I am her substitute. And what I'm going to read is just a paragraph that Lynn and I collaborated on. And it's called The Music Program Over the Years. And because Lynn and her family have been members of this church for so long, I really wanted to focus on her life story as a way of illustrating what music has meant to the St. Matthew's family over the years. Lynn writes, "On the timeline is a photo from 1958. My family sitting on the front steps of St. Matthew's on the day of my baptism. My love of singing and the special sound of pipe organ music began when I was in utero. My mother loved to sing, whether in the pews or in the choir, and I was there to experience it all." So, in Lynn's story, I think we have the story of music here. For over a century, parishioners have worshiped and praised God with music here at St. Matthew's. From the early all-male choirs to today's choir, angel choir, and the evening service musicians. Music brought many of us to St. Matthew's then and now, because it is a special language for prayer, reflection, and joy. Early parishioners scrimped and saved to purchase our pipe organ, and I would point out that they spent $3,000 on a pipe organ in 1927 before they even had central heating. They bought the oil boiler in 1931. So they had their priorities in the right place as far as I'm concerned. Music directors, including J. Michael Compton. And did you realize that Michael has now been our director for almost 1/4 of the entire history of this church? I don't think he's here to hear this, but I'm going to remind him. He may not thank me for reminding him of this fact, but it's true. Since the beginning of this church, the language of music has brought so many of us close to God. After years away from the church, Lynn Jenkins returned to St. Matthew's, and she joined the choir. She writes, "This started an amazing rediscovery of my spiritual self and the discovery of a whole new vocal range. You all would be surprised to learn that at St. Olaf, Lynn actually sang the lowest women's part, second alto. Right? Michael said, no, you're a soprano." And she said, "Really?" And he said, "Yes, really." She writes, "The liturgical music flowed into my spiritual life and nourished my soul. I hope that by singing, I might help everyone at church also go to that place that only God's gift of music can take you. Were all the musicians of St. Matthew's here today, they would, I think, voice this same hope and join us in our continuing hymns of praise and thanksgiving. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. I just want to go back for 1 second. This is Jerry Jenkins, who is our first female senior warden as well, and in the choir. I'd like to ask Bruce Nerland to come up and talk about ministry with neighbors who are homeless. Thank you, Bruce.
You know, I'm so glad that Dan and Jane White are here this morning, along with Grant and Elaine, because on a personal note, timing is everything. And in 1982, when my wife Ann and I were married, we had just been in the Twin Cities for about a year and a half. We didn't know very many people, and we ended up renting a duplex on Como. And we came to St. Matthew's one Sunday, and it was in that transition period when Grant had just been hired to sort of bring young people in, and I tell you, we were like mobbed, snagged, whatever. But truly, it was so wonderful because we were invited out to people's homes for dinners and all sorts of things, and we really didn't know any people, no relatives in town, and 32 years later, here we are. So but for Dan and Jane and the momentum that started with Grant and Elaine, we wouldn't be here, and it's been a wonderful thread in our life, and this place has been very special to us, so thank you. Ann says the same thing, I'm sure. Looking at time here, I'm just going to read this report, but I'm just going to speak to you about St. Matthew's and its tradition, history of working with the homeless. St. Matthew's has a history of supporting homeless youth. In 2000, Mike Christensen and Bruce Nerland began a several-year journey of converting the abandoned St. Barnabas Episcopal Hospital in downtown Minneapolis to apartments for homeless youth. Bruce brought the idea to the diocese, and the diocese liked the idea, and so he led a fundraising campaign which raised about $400,000, which was just enough to get this project started. And since its opening in 2005, St. Barnabas has been continually full, which isn't good because it means business is too good for the homeless, but it's been an important place that's provided 39 apartments and social services to homeless youth. And many members of this congregation have been financial supporters and very important to this place. Over the years, we've had a connection with St. Barnabas and the residents. We've had many Christmas parties down there with the youth, gift-making parties, and baking Christmas treats and things like that with the residents. There's also been some job information fairs and several donation drives for outfitting the apartments and such. More recently, members of St. Matthew's have been active supporters and volunteers of YouthLink, which provides services and support for these homeless youth. Lisa Wiens-Heinsohn and Bertie Carter meet regularly in downtown Minneapolis at the Youth Opportunity Center of YouthLink to offer friendship and spiritual support to youth. In 2000, St. Matthew's got involved with Project Home, which we all know about. I would venture to say that's probably the outreach ministry that we've had the most participation in over the years, and it's so important. But Ann and Bruce Nerland, in consultation with Grant Abbott, who was on the St. Paul Area Council of Churches Board, we launched this ministry to provide overflow housing to homeless children and their parents at St. Matthew's each August. In 2014, St. Matthew's, along with other participating Project Home congregations, became one of the official Ramsey County shelters rather than just an overflow homeless shelter. There's been so many involved, like I said, over the years, but I would have to give special recognition to Elaine Terone, who has done such a wonderful job organizing this the last few years. St. Matthew started serving meals through loaves and fishes at the Dorothy Day Center in the late 1980s or early 1990s, not sure here. Bev Dumas was in charge of this ministry in the early 90s, and then Ray Dittman took over for a 25-year leadership team. 25 years. And now we're in the able hands of David McKenna and others in the church, but it's been a terrific ministry. The Blue House in Kazotown, Uganda is also another ministry supported by the people of St. Matthew's, which involves providing shelter, as well as food, guidance, and a hopeful future to 40 girls who have lost their parents to HIV/AIDS. And I believe you'll be hearing about that now. Thank you very much.
Bruce, thank you, and thank you. Bruce is chair of the board at Youth Link, so has continued to give so much time, so many of his gifts to homeless young adults. Thank you. I want to ask Kennedy Nyenya to come forward to talk about a global community. On our website, we say we are a neighborhood church with a global community. So Kennedy, please tell us more about that.
Thank you, Blair. Talking about a global community, St. Matthew's refers to itself as a neighborhood church with a worldwide community. The church was built by at least one recent immigrant, Marcus Sensen Vong of Norway, and over time included people from a multitude of countries and cultures. Currently, at least 12 non-Western nations are represented at St. Matthew's, a gift from God and our proximity to the University of Minnesota, especially international student housing. Currently, our faith community includes men, women, and children from Zimbabwe, Zambia, Nigeria, Uganda, Tanzania, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Haiti, Jamaica, Singapore, China, the Philippines, and Malaysia. Those of us from the West have immigrant ancestors who came from Norway, Sweden, Germany, England, Ireland, Scotland, Italy, and France, as well as many other countries. Beatrice Garubanda, who came to the Twin Cities from Kazotown, Uganda, was instrumental in helping now grow St. Matthew's international and non-Western presence. She invited many people to church, and especially children from her neighborhood. On any given Sunday, at least 2 pews were full of children she brought to the church, the children of parents born in Uganda and other parts of Africa. In the 90s, St. Matthew's hired her to reach out to international students at the university and Luther Seminary. In the 80s and 90s, the church had a series of international dinners brought to celebrate many cultures, customs, and foods represented by church members, as well as a way of reaching out to neighbors in the surrounding community from other cultures. Longtime neighbor Bishara Ailabuni, a Palestinian Christian and owner of Abu Nadeh restaurant, remembers that he and his son were invited to St. Matthew's not long after 9/11 for dinner to speak out about their Palestinian culture and heritage. They also had a chance to speak out about how difficult it was to be a person from the Middle East in America at that time. His son spoke, and Bishara later said that this was a very emotional and important experience for both son and father. After this, St. Matthew's hosted a groom's dinner for Bishara and Isabella's son, and as an act of thanksgiving, provided the pita bread for a Sunday morning Eucharist until his restaurant closed. Beginning in 2006, St. Matthew's began to use liturgies from around the Anglican Communion in Epiphany. Over time, we developed a global repertoire of prayers and music from parishioners' home countries, including Kenya, Jamaica, Zimbabwe, China, Uganda, and Nigeria. We also spent one Epiphany season focusing on a Native American liturgy comprised of prayers from Christians representing many Native American cultures. We are indeed a neighborhood church with a global community, and what a blessing it is to learn more about God and God's world from one another. Thank you.
And you may not know this, but almost every year, Kennedy Nyenya has put together the PowerPoint for the learning time before the liturgy we're featuring. Has spent hours putting together all those PowerPoints so we can learn more about one another's countries and cultures. I wonder if Joseph Shalita is here. Wonderful. Some folks, we had the Twin Cities Marathon today, and so some folks were stuck in that traffic, but I know that Joseph is a very patient man, so he probably prayed while the runners went by. He is going to tell us more about the Blue House and Beatrice Garabanda. Joseph?
Thank you, Reverend Blair. Good morning, everybody. I'm very happy and privileged to be here. I just want to say Karen made a great statement about Beatrice, that she truly is a saint from this church. It's through her vision that today the Blue House in Kazo has 40 girls. And I'm here also on behalf of the board that coordinates all the support for the Blue House, and that's the Hope Multipurpose. I'm on the board there. I've been there for about a year and a half. It's just a great privilege. We didn't realize that during all this time, these girls are growing up, and now finally one of them has been accepted to college, university, and another one is going to vocational school. And this is all because of the support that originated right here in this church from new parishioners and who are keeping Beatrice's vision alive. And so I want to say that on behalf of Hope Multipurpose and on behalf of the Blue House and the girls, thank you very much. Thank you so much. May God continue to bless you and this church. And as Kennedy said, this is truly a world church right here. It's a world community, and it's God really working as it's supposed to be. Because we are one people, no matter where you come from, no matter what your complexion is like, no matter what, we are one people. And so thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Joseph. Appreciate that. Now I'd like to ask Therese Lewis to come forward to talk about Christian formation.
Well, a love for learning has been a part of St. Matthew's identity since our very earliest days. As you heard about our connection with the Breck School, just a few doors down, and the University of Minnesota Farm Campus, later the international students who live there, and nearby Luther Seminary, Christian education and formation have been an essential part of who we are. Well, since we didn't have regular Sunday school classes this week, I had time to dig around in the archives. And I had a lot of fun looking at annual reports and old newsletters, and sadly, I don't have time to read them all to you today. It's too bad. But I did find a few threads that I was able to trace all through our earliest records. I just wanted to share some of those with you today. So one thing I found out was that kids have been squirrely since the dawn of time. At least since 1932, when the church school report said, discipline has been improved considerably, though we still have some very decided problems in that line. So the kids are sitting way at the back there, but I wanted to tell you that if anybody tries to tell you how well-behaved children were in their day, just smile and nod politely. I'm glad to report we have no problems in that line today. I also found that no Sunday school director in the history of St. Matthew's, and probably of the world, has ever felt that they had quite enough Sunday school teachers. Rector Orrin Griesmeyer wrote in 1932, "The great need at present is for a few extra teachers." And that sentiment has been echoed down the ages. But I feel very blessed to say that we have more adults involved with our children and youth now than we ever have before. And in 2000... in 2008, when we called the Reverend Yanni Swart to be the most overqualified youth director in history, we asked him to help us move toward fuller ownership of our youth ministry by the entire congregation. And that is one of the most important legacies that he has left us. Well, what we do here together is very important, I found, but the formation that takes place at home is essential. When Jean Hanna was the Sunday school superintendent in 1974, she wrote in her annual report, "We do not want our children to think of religion as reserved for Sunday, just one thing among many things. Children learn best by example, and your devotion to our Lord will give your child his strongest desire to live the Christian life day by day." Can I get an amen? Amen. So one crucial way that St. Matthew's is equipping parents to nurture their children's faith is by offering excellent adult formation classes in many forms. Sometimes they're a little too excellent and they compete with me recruiting Sunday school teachers, but that is an excellent problem to have. And I also found that although we've always taken Christian education seriously, teaching Sunday school has always been more about relationships than about curriculum. In the Centennial booklet, parishioner Donald Fish recalled teaching in the 1920s and 30s. He said, "I taught a 7th and 8th grade Sunday school class, and each Sunday, if things were normal, we discussed the Saturday football games and all of the current movies, and if we were lucky, we had about 10 minutes of serious Sunday school lesson." So I know that our teachers can relate to that. Curricula have come a long way, and we're really blessed with some truly engaging materials that we can tailor to each group's interests. But the loving presence of an adult who's simply there to listen and get to know our kids deeply is more important than the flashiest curriculum. So our kids now move through the youth program in stable cohorts, and usually taught by the same team of teachers for several years. So we're able to foster very deep relationships. And more adults are understanding that our role is to be co-learners with children and youth. We're companions on the journey as we learn together what it means to follow the way of Jesus. We began doing a lot of intergenerational gatherings back in 2008, 2010, and those are really bearing fruit in deep relationships. We've also been blessed through the years with very courageous truth tellers and visionaries. In 1951, the Sunday school superintendent was Charles Wright, and he expressed some candid frustrations. He said, "We feel very keenly that there must be reawakened a sense of responsibility towards our church school. Logic tells us that in some measure our future depends upon strengthening our position in this department." And he was right. And those concerns were echoed again in 1958 when it was felt that there was a decided lack of interest by adults in the church school. That year, there were 75 children enrolled in Sunday school, and we had neither of the two additions that we're blessed with now. At that time, the 6th graders met in the kitchen, the 4th and 5th graders met in the choir room, the 2nd and 3rd graders were in opposite corners of the parish hall, and 2 classes met at the same time in the stage room. So in 1960, Karen Gerst was the Sunday school secretary, and she reported that the enrollment from the nursery through junior high totaled 96 students, and there was still no addition yet. So the completion of the first edition in 1962 finally brought the facilities that the Sunday school classes desperately needed. But just a few years later, enrollment began a steady decline. In 1970, Dick Hotchkiss was church school superintendent, and he didn't mince words in his annual report. He said, "Church school is limping along another year with insufficient staff and low enrollment." The decline continued until there were no children left. It's hard to imagine St. Matthew's without children, but 1980 was a year without Sunday school. But God was still at work. A new children's choir emerged that year, and when Grant Abbott was called in 1981, St. Matthew's had just one child, Emily Savage. By 1983, the children's learning program was building again, and Grant emphasized in his 1983 report that the wholeness which Christ makes possible for us is a lifelong process. And he said that Christian education at St. Matthew's must be for all ages. By 1985, Debbie Wilms reported that our teachers are a most valuable asset to this community. Every Sunday, they offer their love and faith to the next generation. The attitudes our children have about the church are deeply affected by these people. Our children's learning program is a warm, loving, laughter-filled place of which the whole community may be proud. And during that time was when I've heard stories about Beatrice Garabanda plucking children out of their yards to bring them to church. And I've heard that that was a challenge for some of the more prim and proper ladies of the church, but their sense of hospitality won out, and they welcomed those children with open arms. So by 1988, already a quarter of children of the congregation was under 16. And that was less than a decade after the death of the Sunday school program. God was always bringing forth new life. So St. Matthew's responded by moving boldly into the future. We hired Lydia Brown in 1995, and under her leadership implemented Godly Play. And soon we were outgrowing our space again, and in 1997 built the new addition. So Lise Christensen began her tenure from 2016 to 2013 and deepened our Godly Play, which still we follow to this day. And that has outflowed into many areas of our learning. So here we are with, God has given us everything that we need to thrive. And that's been through the faithful vision and hard work of all those who have gone before us. We have these beautiful spaces, dedicated teachers, and beyond the teaching staff, we have a really broad network of caring adults who are always seeking out ways to connect with our kids and learn with them. We have a clear path to follow and concrete practices to learn as we follow the way of Jesus.
And the one person Therese Lewis did not name in her report was Therese Lewis, who has done, we are at capacity now. We have more kids in the Sunday school than we've ever had. We are over 40% 16 and under at St. Matt's. Just a real anomaly. Thank you, Therese, for your great work. Just a couple stories about people. We'll open it up, but I think I'm going to, on the spot, have our marvelous leader, Katie White, come up after these three stories. We can keep storytelling, just some of us have to disappear to get ready for worship. I'm going to now ask Mary Griffin to come forward to talk about one of the builders of this church, Marcus Vaughn. His granddaughter, Marianne Evander, is here today. Can you stand? Welcome. Walked into the church about 4 weeks ago for a tour, and made many of our day. Mary?
When Ray and I were discussing marriage and looking for a church to be married in, our friends Chris and Sam Simmons said, "Oh, we finally found a church we really like." And Sam is running a marathon right now. So I came here and I liked the people. The building was also really beautiful, and that's one of the things that I've always appreciated about St. Matthew's, and I appreciate the fact that everybody else likes the building. You know, we haven't completely modernized the upstairs. My family is Norwegian. These Marcus Hansen Vong in the photo here is also Norwegian. He arrived in the U.S. in 1906. He was about 21. He was born in 1885. And he had about $10 in his pocket. He was the only member of his large family to leave Norway at a place called Enigheden Lodge, a boarding house with many young Scandinavian immigrants. He met Elsie Larsen, who is quite pretty as far as I can see here. And they were married in 1911. They lived in St. Anthony Park all their lives. This is the house that they built at 1550 Fulham, which is 3 houses south of Hoyt. And I believe you said they called this the shack? The shanty, okay. It has been replaced by another house. They lived in other houses in St. Anthony Park, ending up on Como at Commonwealth. They had 3 children, a daughter, Margaret, and 2 sons, Elmer and Clifford. Marcus was a carpenter. He participated in the building of the Breck School, the original one that we saw a photo of earlier, and his sons were invited to attend as part of his recompense for that work. But he also worked on the construction of St. Matthew's, and apparently the grandchildren referred to it as the church that Grandpa built. They said that Marcus never became a wealthy man because he was good-hearted and he sometimes didn't take payment for his work. I can believe that. I love this photo of this young couple, and I like to think of him participating in our church. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mary. What a special treat to have that story now part of our collective stories. Now I'd like to have John Lawyer come forward and talk about a parishioner who is here who lived to be 101, Emma Hughes.
Thanks, Blair. Lynn cannot be here today herself due to a family wedding in Alabama, but I will read her report. I might mention the Reverend Lynn Lawyer came here in 1986, the first woman clergy to be here. And, you know, clergy come, clergy go. It sounds interesting, but not maybe a big deal. In 1986, it was a big deal because she was the first woman to be serving at the altar. And this is coming right after all the turmoil of the prayer book and all the rest. And there was a bit of... pushback. Yeah. Well, that too. But between her perseverance, Grant's very strong, generous, and loving support, and the congregation itself having to adjust to new things, which none of us like to do, nonetheless persevered. And she was here for, I think, 18 years. Well, this is one of the stories of her ministry about Emma Hughes. Emma Hughes, who is the young lady down there. Yeah, who is the other person, Grant?
I don't know who that is. It might be one of her daughters.
That would make sense. Emma Hughes. Emma was one of the first people that I being Lynn, Emma was one of the first people that I was asked to visit when I came to St. Matthew's in 1985. I love visiting with her because she was usually so upbeat and delightful to talk with. She told me that she was the first person to be baptized at St. Matthew's. A fact that cannot be proved, although Grant testifies that she was, as there are no records from 1889. Oral tradition, yes.
That's oral tradition.
She loved the little white church on the hill. She told me that as a young girl who had few resources of her own, she would go to the church and they would let her borrow books, which impressed her so much that she wrote a poem about it. Emma lived her entire life in St. Anthony Park, save for a few years with her daughter in Roseville. She married and bore 10 children, outliving 7 of them. I knew I had to visit her on the anniversary of the deaths of children and grandchildren because she wanted to pray for them and tell me about them. She also told me that when times were tough for her, which was often, Dr. Haupt would come visit with her, kneel down in her living room and pray with her, often leaving her with a little something to help put food on the table for the children. She also loved the state fair and won scrapbooks full of blue ribbons for her knitting and cooking. She showed me these books with great fondness for the good times they represented. When it became time for her to stop knitting, hands and eyes just not cooperating well enough, she insisted on a ceremony. She laid down the needles and yarn, thanked God for all the fun she had making things, and then asked, what was she to do next? I believe she was 98 or 99 at the time. The thing I remember most about Emma is that she taught me how to grieve honestly and in the presence of God. Knowing how to grieve well is vital in growing old gracefully. She showed me how to accept loss as part of aging. Emma said that death was going to be the grandest adventure of her life, and she didn't want to miss it. On that day, June 9, 1990, several of us were gathered around her bed at the St. Anthony Park Nursing Home. She was joking and chatting with us when suddenly she looked up and said, "Here they come." Her eyes closed and she got her wish. We celebrated her life on June 13th. She was 101 years old.
Wow. Thank you so much, John. Appreciate that. We next have Jenny Bach coming up to talk about the Hanna family, a Palestinian Christian family the church sponsored. After this, I'm going to run up to get ready for worship. So Katie, if you would facilitate from here, and I do know that Liz Morrison has some memories from growing up here, and then we'll open it up. And so thank you, Jenny.
So I have a brief little description of what happened with this family, submitted by Bill, Jean, Ned, and George Hanna. It's a history of their time and the legacy of the Hanna family at St. Matthew's Episcopal Church. They say, a Palestinian Christian family who came to the USA in 1956 was sponsored by St. Matthew's Episcopal Church. It was Najib and Warda Hanna and their 3 children, Nabil, Najwa, and Nadim, also the sister of Najib, Badia. In 1961, they became naturalized American citizens and changed their names to James, Rose, Bill, Jean, Ned, and Betty. And another son was then born in 1959, and he was named George. Grateful to be in a loving and caring community, the Hanna family became very active in the life of St. Matthew's. I think if you're paying attention, you've heard Hanna names a couple of times in some of the other reports here. James became superintendent of the church school program at St. Matthew's, and his sister Betty taught Sunday school. In 1963, James passed away following a brief period of illness from acute leukemia. Rose set forth to raise her family and kept them all active in the church life at St. Matthew's. The Hanna family served the church in many capacities over the years and saw many changes in the decline of its membership as well as new growth. In 1979, Betty passed away after living her last 3 years at the Episcopal Church nursing home. Being from the Holy Land, the Hanna family shared their culture and traditions with the parish of St. Matthew's and surrounding community. In particular was a Holy Communion bread, which Rose made faithfully every Sunday for the church services. In 2005, Rose passed away, leaving a remarkable legacy to her children and the community at large. Respectfully submitted, Bill, Jean, Ned, and George Hanna.
Yes.
Liz? Liz is going to tell us some stories.
Hello, I am I'm the shy one of the family. I'm Liz Hotchkiss. My dad is right here. One of the elders, Dick Hotchkiss, next to my wonderful new husband, Larry. So I am Liz Hotchkiss Morrison, now O'Toole. Okay, our family joined the church in 1964 before my younger sister Martha was born. Martha's in the choir right now. My parents are Dick Hotchkiss and my mother, Alison Hotchkiss, who did pass away in 1997. My siblings are Peter, Matthew, Sarah, and Martha. So some of those names, some of the elders would remember. Our father was active on the vestry. My mother was active in the altar guild and women's groups, choir, and many other things. Our family lived on Doswell, right near Highway 280, and so we usually walked to church in good weather. Our family attended Catholic Episcopal camp for 2 years in the early 1970s. We loved fishing, exploring, singing by the campfire. They even allowed kids to receive communion before they were confirmed. Confirmation in those days, so I'm 51, so in 6th grade, that was 1975. Confirmation was in 5th grade in those days in the Father Pitts era. We had to memorize the Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed, and the Lord's Prayer. And we had to say them to Father Pitts to prove that you knew it. Saturday classes were in Father Pitts' office, and that was located where the choir room is today. Girls wore handkerchiefs on their forehead, as ladies' heads had to be covered. Communion was not allowed until you were formally confirmed. In the Father Pitts era, girls were not allowed to be altar boys. We were only allowed to help for the Lent Wednesday evening services, and there was a lot of kneeling in those days. You couldn't just sit on your heels. Lent evening services were the only time jeans were allowed to be worn in our family. Otherwise, jeans were never worn at church, according to my mother, Alice Hotchkiss. To this day, I still would have a hard time wearing jeans to church. Good Friday services were 4 hours back then to symbolize how long Jesus was on the cross and died, if I'm remembering right. And at least once I attended the whole 4 hours as a teenager. Sunday school during that time was during church. Kids left right before the sermon, and parents picked up the kids after church because kids were not allowed to have communion anyways. Youth group was started in the late 1970s, Sunday nights. We had dinner and games, and we took turns making dinners. I remember the church had a haunted house put on by the big kids, and it was scary at that time. Children's choir is a nice memory. Janet Pitts, who is Father Pitts and Bess Pitts' daughter, and Sarah Herding had a quote-unquote a good time dealing with the shenanigans of us kids. So we practiced Wednesday nights. We had blue choir robes. We sang with the adult choir. We had children-sized hymnals. I remember Mary Thomas, one of the former organists. She would smoke like a chimney while playing the organ. Sadly, I think she died of lung cancer. Sadly. But I just remember her as being very nice. I remember all the adults being very nice, as a kid. So I left in '81, and then I came back in 2006, because I was up north living, raising my son. And again, by the Hanna family. Middle Eastern dinners were by the Hanna family. That was a fundraiser, I believe. And I don't remember what the fundraiser was for. But we teenagers were the waiter and waitresses, serving people and asking people what they wanted to drink. Epiphany in January was a fun time for kids. And I think that maybe was the annual meeting. It was in conjunction with the annual meeting time. Grand Abbot said, So a ring was hidden in a large sheet cake. And the person who got the ring got to be king or queen for the day. I saw a picture of Joan with a crown, so maybe that was the Epiphany crown. And I remember my sister Martha found the ring one year and got to wear the crown for the day. Okay, so overall, I have happy memories of St. Matthew's. Church and friends I've met at church helped guide me and gave me direction as a child and teenager and young adult. Wonderful memories. Thank you.
So I'd like to thank everyone who contributed their stories today in presentations, and also the stories for the written booklet that we'll be assembling later. Please, everyone, if you haven't yet, take a look at the wonderful presentation from the Art Committee and from Laura Bathke and her team that they have put together here. And we'll see you upstairs. Thank you all very much.